so much for joining me today for the Sand and Seashell Craft Kit tutorial. My name is Anna Chan. I'm a local mixed media artist, and about a year and a half ago I started creating sand sculptures at Robert Moses Beach using the seashells that I find there. And you can see some of my creations behind me. They've since become wall art, and today I will show you how to make your own little masterpieces. So let's get started and take a look at what we have in the kit. This is the sand kit that's been provided to you. Here is the Qwick sand, which we'll be using. It's an organic, self-hardening sand that will become the background of our piece. This is a container of seashells and the stir stick. And here's an 8 by 8 inch frame, and you can see in the back there's the hanging mechanism. So make sure when you put it back down that this is facing at the top and not in the bottom, otherwise it'll be upside down. Okay, so here we go. First of all, we're going to take the seashells out of the container, and I would suggest if you could just take a piece of paper. I'm going to put this here. Okay, and we're going to take the seashells out and put them here and sort them, so that way it'll be much easier when we start working with them. This is the piece that we will be using to put any kind of verbiage, wording that you want to include on your sand kit, sand art. So I'm going to put this up over here, and I'm going to sort out the shells. So you should do the same, otherwise you're going to be a little lost when we're making the piece. So these are the arc shells that you see here. Now, just so you know, you might have other colors in your kit, which really isn't going to be a big deal because they're all going to be unique, and there's a range of colors, so we're not going to be picky about what colors that was in your kit, but it should be generally around this color range. Secondly, we have these tusk shells, so a little pointy. I'm gonna put them here. And these shells were dyed to these colors. They're not natural, but I picked these colorful shells because I figure it'll make the piece stand out more. Okay, so here we go. All right, and then we have the coquinas. We have big ones and small ones. So I don't know if you want to separate them by size, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to try to separate it as best as I can. Okay, so the next one is the embodium. They're the little curl like buttons. I'm going to put them here. And they will end up being the belly of the seahorse. the next one, they're like little pyramids or cones. These are called top shells. Put them over here. And they also come in a range of sizes. Last but not least, these are called the Seahorse. So we're gonna put them right here, and you should have 4 of them. Okay, so once we have these seashells sorted out, you should keep the container because this is gonna be your water measuring cup. Okay, so before we get started, I have a few suggestions. If you already had problem picking up the shells when we were sorting them, I would highly recommend using a tweezer because then it'll make it easier to pick up these little pieces. But if you feel like you can just use your fingers, that by all means do that too. I will also suggest a container. If you have an old takeout container or anything that container that you're not using for food, it would make the mixing a lot easier putting it in there, but you could also just do it in the bag. I'm just gonna mix it in the bowl because then that way we can make sure the sand is fully saturated with water. Okay, so let's move the frame out of the way and put the container in the middle. And we are going to use 1 cup of water, or not 1 cup, 2 ounce cup of water. This was included in the kit. And I would just fill it to about here, not overflowing. And I'm gonna pour it into the container and take the sand. Here is a little cut, so you should be able to just rip it open. And then I'm gonna pour it in and just let it settle, soak in a little bit, and then I'm gonna mix it up. So as you can see, it's moist, but it's not soaked. And if yours is a little wetter than this, it's okay. It just means it will just take the sand a little longer to dry. The drying period is about 2 days. You can put it close to the window so the sun gets to it. Maybe it'll dry a little faster, or put it near somewhere warm. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep mixing it a little bit more so the water saturates all the sand. And when you see that everything is moist and you don't have any dry patches, then you're pretty much good to go. Okay, so again, make sure the hanging bit is at the top. And I'm going to put this frame right here in the middle. Okay. And I'm going to just get all the sand out and into the frame. Just be careful that you don't get the rim filled with sand, but if you do, it's okay. You can just use a wet paper towel to clean it off at the end. If you don't clean it off, the sand's gonna end up drying on the frame, and you're gonna have sand bits on the frame. If that's what you want, you can do that too. So I'm gonna try to get most of this in there. Okay. And when you're done, okay, this is how it's gonna look. So before we move any further, I would also suggest like a piece of paper towel right here so you can dry your fingers or clean your fingers up. That container, I would fill it up with a little bit of water and put it next to you so you can rinse your finger off if it gets too tacky. And if you don't want to use or touch the sand, you can always use a rubber glove or, you know, something, clear glove. That way you won't get your fingers too dirty or too sticky. But here we're gonna use the stir stick. I'm gonna try to smooth it onto the frame. Okay. So put this here, but at some point you're just really gonna, it's more efficient to use your hand. And it's actually really, if you like playing with sand, it's actually really therapeutic. Or you like the feeling of being on the beach. This is as close as it will get right now in the winter. So here you go. Smooth it out. Doesn't have to be completely flat. Just do the best you can. More importantly, like areas like this should be covered with sand because then you don't want holes in your piece. But if I'm going too quickly, you can always pause this video and catch up and then restart the video again. All right, so here, just gonna, you find that you have too much sand in the middle and it's really shallow on the side, you can always just kind of brush it over. And this is the time to do it because the sand is still wet and it's not drying. As we work, it's gonna settle in more, the water's gonna kind of go down towards the bottom of the frame, and it's gonna be harder to get a smooth surface. So I would take the time and really smooth it out right now to the best of your liking, okay? And if you're done, you can also fast forward. Okay, I like to just use my thumb, gently tapping it, and it just smooths out. You press too hard, see, if you press really hard, you're gonna make it worse. So this is all about just gentle touch and like pat it lightly, like you're handling a baby. Okay. Okay, smooth it out. You see my hand's already getting kind of tacky with the sand. Rinse it out a little bit. And I'm gonna have to fill it up a little bit more water, but that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna wash my hands after this. Okay. All right, I think this is pretty good. All right. I'm gonna call it done. So you can get it smoother. I mean, I don't know how much smoother it's gonna get, but I'm gonna move on to the next step. So before that, I would recommend washing your hands, because if you start touching the seashells now, you're gonna get them all sandy, and that's gonna end up, you're gonna have a really sandy seahorse. So I'm gonna go wash my hands and we will start the next step. Okay, so your package also came with a little card, and this is the seahorse we're making today. But if you feel like you wanna be creative and make your own piece, by all means, you know, you have the shells, you can be as creative as you want. I gave this kit to my niece, and she actually definitely did not want to follow my design. So she made herself a little garden. She used these arch shells as a butterfly. And these she made flowers with. So you can be as creative as you want. If you do want to go that route and you're wondering what I've made it with my seashells in the past, you can go to my website, and there you will see a lot of different designs I've done. They're much more complicated than these, and I really didn't use these shells. I used local Long Island shells that I pick at Robert Moses Beach, and they're more sculptural than what we're making, because it's just more advanced. So this is really more of a beginner's kit. Okay, so let's begin. We are going to start with the eye, which is about 1 inch down and 1 inch to the right. So I'm going to put this here so I can see. I think I'm going to use the blue again. And I'm just going to put it there, but don't push it in yet, because we're going to lay everything out first, or close to it, before we push everything in. And the next thing we're going to do is the top of the head, the back, and the cheek. And these are created with the arc shell. And you can just pick whichever color you like, whatever size. Though you will find, even though they're not, the size isn't that much of a difference, sometimes some pieces lay better next to each other or create a better shape. So that's up to you to play with at home. That's the part you can be creative with. I'm gonna do something like this. Okay. I think this piece is too big, so I'm going to pick a smaller piece so it fits nicer, because we're trying to get the general shape of the seahorse. Okay, maybe something like that. Okay, well, you know what? I think I'm going to put a bigger piece in the back. So you can see there's a lot of playing around with it and trying to get it all to fit together. All right, so I think this is more what we're trying to do. There we go. All right, so here's the real piece. So you can see the eye is a little further in the front. Move this up a little. There we go. And just keep in mind, because we have the rest of the body to contend with, so you want to make sure you come as close to the top edge as you can. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough space down here. Okay. All right. So I think that's we can see. All right, so I'm pretty close up there. Okay. The next thing is the tusk. You can use 2 different colors. I'm going to try 2 different colors this time. And the back is going to be smaller than the one in the front. So I want to use blue. I'm going to still use purple. This purple one's pretty big, but it might be too big. So let's try, I'm going to do this red one. Okay. Do this red one. Okay. And then I'm going to have this, a smaller piece right here. There we go. So that's sort of my mouth. Okay. Give or take. Yours don't have to look exact. You can certainly use your creative license, which is okay. All right, so now we're going to move on to the coquina here, which is sort of the neck. And that should be a relatively bigger piece. And you can see there is a left and a right side. So, I mean, again, you can use one that's opposite. It's up to you. Maybe that will work better in this case. I'm going to try that. Just going to play around with it. And the next thing would be these shell, which you have 4 of them, and that's going to make the little spiny thing in the back of the neck. All right, I'm going to move this out of the way for now. And here we are, we're going to put one. I like to start with the biggest and then gradually go smaller down. So I'm just going to put this one right here, 1. And then 2. Again, don't push them in yet. We will have the chance to do that very soon. Okay. So we have a general head and neck shape now. Next step is to take the embodium, and here we are going to create the belly. So as you can see, it kind of goes out a little and then come back in. And then the back kind of curves a little, so just try to follow that shape. And you have your little printout. Keep it in front of you so you can look at it while you're working. You don't have to look at the screen if you don't want to. You can just have me in the background. Okay, so I'm gonna start putting it down. Try to just leave some space in between the seashells, because when we do push them in, they're going to need some space around them. Otherwise, it's just going to push, when you push one in, the other one's going to pop out. And we can always tighten this up later when we push it in. So I would just put different. And as you can see, they're not uniform in size. So, you know, spread them out. Some areas use bigger ones. Some areas you can use smaller ones. Doesn't have to be exactly what I'm using, because every kit is different. And that's the fun of it, that you can still have something a little unique. Now, I do want to do something a little different here because some of my embodiums are really small, and if you can see in my piece, I didn't really use these pyramid shaped ones. So we're going to use them here to make it more interesting. I'm going to put some here to fill in some of the space. And we have lots of those. So let's do that. There we go. So just lay them out in the general shape of the belly. It doesn't really matter where they go. It's all going to end up looking good. Okay. All right. So now, let me put some more here. I want this to be a little more of a belly down here. All right. So now we're going to put the arc right here as the back of the seahorse, the little fin. And then we're going to use these coquinas as the end of the belly and then the tail. So if you find, if you have tweezers and you rather use tweezers, maybe it'll be easier to move these around. These ones, if you don't want them sticking up like this, you can also use them, when we do push them in, you push them in upside down, whichever way. You be as creative as you want. But here we go. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to move this way over there for now. Right. This is the part you're going to have to play around with a little bit. The idea is to get these seashells to sort of fit in, not kind of nice and tight, not too tight, but less gap, the better. So it looks more like a mosaic. And you see here, I'm putting it this way. My original one, I had this piece going up, like the smaller part here. So, play around with how you want to make yours. It doesn't have to be exactly like my picture, as long as you have the general idea of what it should look like. I think it will come out okay. Okay, now we're getting to the curl of the tail. And this, I do like to start graduating to smaller size. So it's not so, it will look more like a real tail where it gets thinner and thinner. Okay. I think I'm going to do one more. Smaller one. There we go. So I have the general shape laid out. I think that wasn't too hard. Now you can really play around with, the shape of it. How do we like it? Do we like it Do we want to move things around a little bit before we push it in? So I think I want this to be a little more, I think I want this to be more pronounced, the belly. Okay. I'm just going to spread these out a little bit so it fills up the space better. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. All right, move this up a little. Every seahorse is unique, so every seahorse art you're making is going to be unique. So don't try to make it exactly like what I'm doing. Do what you want to do, and or try something different if you like. All right, so now we have all that in place, and I'm gonna push it in now before we do the seaweed and clams in the bottom. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the beak. Just gonna push it in. Okay, even pressure, push it in. You want it almost half of it in there. See, that just popped right out, which can get annoying because my finger's starting to get a little sticky. So I'm gonna rinse off my fingertip. Okay, so it doesn't have this stickiness. And I'm just gonna plop that right back in place. And I'm gonna push it in, okay? And then the eye, I'm gonna push that in kind of with my fingertip. All right, and then I'm gonna push these two in together. Okay. So you feel like it's sinking in. That's what I want you to be aware of. Sometimes when you push one in, and then the one next to it pops out a little. So just make sure you see that? That just came up. So you kind of have to do this. Push them both in, okay? And then maybe brush or gently nudge some of the sand to bury the rim of the shell. Or, and here's a good idea to use the stir stick. You can hold this down and just kind of move the sand in place, you know, something like this. I used to be a jeweler, so when we set stones, that's what we would do with the metal, is to push it in. We would burnish the metal around it, and that's how the stone would stay in place. You just gently push these in. Okay, so these are gonna stay, they're not gonna fall out. And you see these like loose sand here? I wouldn't worry about it too much, because when it does dry, everything is hardened. You can kind of scrape that off. Okay, so here I have the head part in pretty good. And then I'm gonna get this part in. Here I'm gonna use my stick again. I think that might make it easier sometimes. There we go. Gentle pressure, okay? And then this is where you can kind of have fun, because the sand is actually gonna harden, so these don't have to lay in completely flat. I like to create a little bit more dimension in my work, so you can have it go in kind of on an angle, you know, like this. Just make sure it's in the sand and not just sort of floating on the top of it. And I'm gonna have this one I'm gonna have it go in flat. So I'm gonna create a little just a little bit of dimension. Some of these going in different directions. That might make it a little more interesting. Okay. And then this guy here, this embodium needs to go in. So again, we're going to push it in gently. Okay. And you'll hear the sand. You'll hear it sinking into the sand. That's the sound you want to hear. So I'm just going to secure these also. I think those are good. And then I'm going to try to, I'm going to turn this so it fits in a little bit better. You see that? That makes it, here, move this up. I'm going to push this in. Okay. And then I'm going to move this down a little. I'm going to have to create, sometimes you're going to have to create some space. All right, so I'm going to put this, push this red one in. Okay, so that's in. And this blue one, I'm gonna, I like my shells to fit snug, so I'm gonna turn it around so it fits nicer. Okay. Push it in. These guys, I think I'm gonna flip them over actually. I think I want them, oops, not just push that out of the way. Wait, there we go. I think I want it like that. Maybe this one, yeah, this one I want it. You can have it pointing out, doesn't really matter. I think I just want it. There we go. So just make sure when you push something in that the shells around it are not popping out. And if they are, you know, gently help it back into the sand. So you're sort of semi-burying them. Not all the way, but enough of it so when the sand hardens, they're going to stay in place. But like I was saying, if they don't stay in place and they fall out, don't worry, because you can always glue it back in with Elmer's glue. Okay. You are going to bound to have some fallout, I'm sure, because that happens to me too. If your stick starts getting sticky, okay, just rinse it into the water. And wipe away the sand. Okay, so... So just proceed to pushing all your shells in now. Okay. Your sand should still be nice and moist and not harden. It's going to take about 2 days for it to completely dry. But pretty much when you're done doing this today, I would not move anything, because if when the sand starts drying and you start moving it, it's not gonna be clean, your effect. You're gonna have sand crumbling here and there, so. just make sure you go around and really get to every seashell, and that they're pushed in. Because like I said, if they're just sitting on top, they're not gonna stay. Okay. Okay, this arc here, I'm gonna use my hand. We're just gonna push this in. Sometimes I find like with big pieces like this, like you kind of gently turn it lightly left and right so it kind of goes into the sand better. And I'm gonna use this stick to make sure the pieces around it that might have popped out when I was pushing that in are back in. Okay. Okay, so, all right. Yeah, bigger pieces, I really just prefer to use my finger because they actually, you might slip with the stir stick. Okay, so pushing it in, pushing it in, pushing it in. Wiggle a little bit back and forth gently, makes it go in easier. Okay. And if you push too hard, you feel like it's buried in too much, then you can always, you know, dig it out. Like dig it out with the stir stick. And then just put it back in where you want it. Like, I mean, here, let me push this up. With this piece, you know, like I was saying, if you want to create some dimension, I might have it go in like that so it kind of comes up a little bit. So it looks like the tail is curling out. You know, that's up to you. Whatever you want to do. But I feel like if I do that and I add this plaque right here, it will look like it's holding my little plaque. Whereas in my original, I had it on the side. You can have it anywhere and you can write whatever you want to write or not. You can leave it out if you don't want to. You want to sign your name, you know, or just put the date, whichever. If you're giving it to someone, you want to put their name. So this, I think eventually I'm going to do something like this so it'll look like the tail is holding it in place, but I will do that in a little bit when I write something on here. So I think we're looking pretty good. And the last thing we have to do now is the little clams on the bottom, a little snail, the seaweed or seagrass. And look at all these seashells we have left. So you can add to this. You can add seashells on the around it. You can put more on the bottom. That's all up to your own creativity. So by all means, do whatever you want, or if you don't feel like, if you feel like it's good enough, you want to follow my design exactly, then you'll have a lot of other, you'll just have a lot of seashells left. I usually include, you know, extras in my kit so people can be as creative as they want, and each masterpiece will be slightly different than the other one. Okay, so this is really the easy part. So now we can just do whatever we want. All right. I'm just gonna go with what I had originally for now. Okay. So just be careful with these pieces that are sticking out so much that, you know, they might end up falling out if you don't bury them in enough. And what's enough is like, here, let me just get this closer. So that's kind of how much I've buried them in. right? What do we got here? Okay, I'm gonna put another one of this here. And maybe a purple one over here. Okay. And I have tons of these left. So. If it's not your first time working with my sand kits, you know, in the future, you could build this part up slightly with more sand. So it's a little domed here, so you get even more dimension. But this is definitely a beginner's tutorial, so we're gonna just keep most of it flat because we still have to get a hang of how to work with the sand. And I want to make sure that your piece comes out as close to what you envision as possible. So here we go. Right, the plaque. So feel free to write anything you want to write on there. I think I'm gonna put the name of my kit is Qwick Craft, so that's what I'm gonna put. Okay. Sharpies I find works the best, but I think any marker would work well. $20.22. Okay. And I think I'm gonna draw some. It's gonna be very similar in color. So maybe I'll do some little seaweed design on the side. I'm just gonna just out of here a little bit. Feel free to do whatever you want or not on this little plaque. You can put hearts, stars, just writing, just words is good too. Even a little drawing if you want. So, I don't know, okay, set it in here. So it looks like this little guy is holding it with his tail. So I'm gonna make sure it's the sand pushes into it. All right, so that's my little seahorse. And this was my original. And you can see right now, the sand is wet, so that's why it's so dark. When it dries, it's gonna have this nice little light beige sparkle to it. This isn't beach sand, so that's why it has a little bit more little kind of crystal specks in it. It just makes it look nicer. Beach sand kind of remains this color, and it looks a little, it doesn't have this as pretty of an effect. So this is the end of the tutorial, and for now, keep it flat like this for 2 days, and by the end of 2 days, touch it. If it feels nice and dry and hard, then I would hold it, you know, then you can lift it up. But for now, I would lay it, keep it flat. Otherwise, these seashells are gonna fall out and you're gonna have a hard time putting them back in. If it starts drying, it's in the process. So just go around, you know, before you leave or clean up, go around, just make sure everything is set in, okay. I would push, you know, and this one, I think I'm gonna have it. And any changes you want to make, this is the time to do it. I'm gonna have this come down a little bit so it looks more like she's holding it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. All right, so here's, I'm just gonna hold it up so you can see that the seashells are pretty well submerged into the sand. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this sand art tutorial, and I hope you'll get to do this again soon. All right, bye.